Alright, good evening folks, it's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to another short war video, and today we have very big news to cover out of Ukraine, Russia, Venezuela, Poland, and China, and let's jump right into it. This morning, Poland has declared a major act of sabotage has occurred after an explosion has destroyed the Warsaw-Lublin railroad track, and Polish authorities now warn a larger attack on Poland is being prepared. Meanwhile, Russia struck a natural gas tanker ship on the border of Romania, causing the Romanian border village of Ploru to be evacuated as authorities fear a catastrophic explosion may be imminent. Meanwhile, we've also seen a major fire break out in the Russian capital of Moscow as protests erupt in some Russian cities over corruption and economic collapse. Meanwhile, near Taiwan, Japan has scrambled fighter jets as Chinese drones have been spotted near Japanese islands, and we also cannot forget about Venezuela because right now there's currently a major deployment of U.S. refueling aircraft operating near the coast of Venezuela, and it looks like something is definitely happening in that area of the world. So we have a lot of very big news today from pretty much everywhere. So let's jump right into our first article, which goes to FlyTux Network. And right now, this is our biggest story of the day. We are hearing from the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk. He is confirming that an act of sabotage was carried out on the Warsaw-Lublin train route and that an explosion destroyed the railway track. And on the same route closer to Lublin, damage was also identified. So this is not good. It sounds like an explosive device was found on the tracks and actually exploded and destroyed the train route. So this is a very big act of sabotage. And right here in the image, you can see these are the officials in Poland looking at the damage. I'm assuming as well, police and prosecutors trying to figure out who did this. But right now, of course, all fingers are pointing right back to Russia because Poland has been the target before of Russian sabotage and also Russian drone attacks too. So this is not looking good. But we actually have the post itself from Donald Tusk, and it generally says the same thing right here. Apparently, the explosion happened around the Mika village in Poland, and we can see that an explosive device was apparently found near the railway track, and the prosecutor's office is currently trying to determine who exactly did this. So we're currently waiting for more details on it, but very disturbing to hear that a real sabotage attack, a very detrimental one, actually destroyed the railway track for a major train route. So that's a very big deal right now. But also, by the way, we've heard even more damning statements out of Poland, and this post goes to Conflict Radar. Because we can see in this post that the chief of the general staff of the Polish Armed Forces, Kukula, has said it seems that an attack on Poland is being prepared, and Russia already has started preparing for war. So already, like I mentioned, they're pointing fingers at Russia, and that is the logical perpetrator of this attack. And right here you can actually see there appears to be some of the damage on the track itself, and to cut the steel quite like that where it literally just is jaded off, that must be a very large explosion that caused that, and it looks like it just blew the steel straight out. So that's a serious act of sabotage right there, and it must have been a pretty large explosive that caused that, but we're waiting on more details right now. But we're hearing some very wild statements out of Poland, and they appear to think that another larger attack is being prepared very soon. So not good whatsoever. But moving into our next post here, this one goes to War Monitor. And we've also heard that Poland will convene an emergency National Security Committee meeting over the sabotage attempts near Warsaw. So once again, they are taking the necessary actions, an emergency meeting to discuss how to handle this. But until they get all the actual evidence from the site, meaning who did it, it's going to be kind of hard to do anything about it. So right now we're waiting on that crucial information to see for a fact if it was Russia behind it. But of course, like I mentioned, they are definitely pointing fingers at Russia. But moving on to our next post here, this one's going to go to Nexta. And the damning statements appear to be coming out one after another today, because we've heard a wild statement from the German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, and he says that this might be Europe's last peaceful summer, and Russia may attack NATO sooner than expected. And his exact quote said, "We have always assumed that a Russian attack on NATO could happen in 2029, but now we're hearing assessments pointing to possible escalation as early as 2028, and some military historians even believe that we've already lived through the last peaceful summer in Europe." So that's a wild statement to make. It sounds like even Germany, and along with Poland, believes that war is imminent, and right now they are saying to prepare for the worst. So it sounds logical. We've seen very big escalation by Russia, and also they've been escalating their hybrid attacks on NATO countries, and also allegedly flying drones over NATO airspace. So it is not too far-fetched to believe that Russia would lash out since their economy is failing. So it appears to be that Germany does believe that as well. But moving on to our next post here, this one goes to Visegrad 24. And while the sabotage is happening in Poland, we're also seeing a major crisis break out on the Romanian-Ukrainian border after a Russian drone attack occurred, and apparently a Russian drone struck a LNG, a natural gas tanker, right on the Ukrainian side of the border. And right now, Romania is evacuating a village near Ukraine after that Russian drone hit the LNG tanker, and residents near Ploru, which is a border village, were evacuated after a Russian drone strike in Ukraine's Izmail area set fire to the Turkish-flagged LNG tanker carrying around 4,000 tons of liquefied gas, and Romanian authorities warned that the gas cargo could explode, creating a serious risk on both sides of the border. So we actually have a video showing this tanker on fire right now, and it appears to be a very, very deadly situation that's breaking out. So let's take a look at the video and see this crisis on the footage. All right, so look at that. That thing is literally, it appears to be the actual ship itself on fire from what I can tell from this video, but that is bad right there. That is very bad. This is an LNG ship carrying about 4,000 tons of cargo, and it appears to be on fire, allegedly, from a Russian drone striking it. So this is quite a sight right here. This is a very bad incident happening right on the Romanian border, and this is causing a lot of evacuations right now. So the Romanians are taking this very seriously, but we also have some more information here how this is affecting the air defense on the border in our next post here, which goes to Geo Insider. Because we've also heard the Romanian army is relocating military radar and surveillance systems from the Danube Delta after a Russian drone strike damaged the LNG vessel nearby, creating an explosion risk, and the army says civilian safety now comes first, even if border monitoring is temporarily impacted. So that appears to be the right move, because once again, if this tanker does explode, I'm not sure exactly how large of an explosion that would be, but naturally it's a large LNG ship, so it could be very catastrophic if it does explode, and right now that is not certain. So the Romanians are playing it extra safe and moving the villagers away from the area, so that way they can't be impacted in case this thing does explode. So we're waiting to see what's going to happen with this, but right now that's a major crisis happening right now in Romania. But moving on to our next post here, this one's going to go to Max 25. Meanwhile, Moscow is burning to the ground, because we've seen in central Moscow, it appears that something is burning heavily near the Christ the Savior Cathedral, and it's not really clear if it's the cathedral itself that's on fire. Nobody's really sure, but something's burning very heavily, and the epicenter of the fire, according to the Russian public groups, is located several dozen meters from the building, but like I said, nobody's really sure what's on fire. So let's take a look at the very short video we have here to see exactly where the smoke is coming from, and maybe we can figure out where it's at. So let's take a look. All right, so right there you can see there is the smoke coming up right there in the city of Moscow, and there appears to be a construction crane off to the right over there, so maybe it's a construction site perhaps, but this is happening right in central Moscow, so this is quite a big deal right here, and we're watching that one very closely. But once again, it appears just to be a fire for now, nothing too crazy, and we're not really sure if it was started on purpose or not, so we're waiting to hear more information about that. But moving on to our next post here, we're also seeing some big trouble in Russia across some villages and cities, because we're seeing a riot, or more like a protest in Novosibirsk, and Russians are protesting against tax increases and corruption. On the eve of the action, the organizer was detained right in the entrance of his own house, because of course the Russians do not like protests, and a similar rally was planned to be held in Vladivostok, but the local authorities refused under the pretext of celebrating the birthday of Santa Claus. And meanwhile, in the Irkutsk region, the deputies spoke out against the draft budget in 2026, and they said that support is almost unchanged, and if last year it was 16 billion rubles, then this year it is at 17, and at the same time, prices, tariffs, fuel, and everything else are growing much faster than even the budget. So as we can see right here, there are people on the street protesting. There's some of them right there, and in Russia, these are some very brave souls, because protests are not taken very kindly inside of Russia. And also look at that commie flag flying back there. That looks like a USSR flag of some sort flying right there in the background. Kind of interesting with that. But also here you can see there's some more images appearing to show a gentleman over here on the left with a megaphone speaking to the crowd, and it looks like some people are actually trying to cover their faces a little bit, and just once again, it seems to be a sort of minor protest. And right down here at the bottom, I think that might be maybe the police right here. I'm not really sure. Maybe soldiers over there on the left, but I have a very strong suspicion that these protests are going to be put down very, very quickly, because Putin knows that once he's gained a foothold and people realize they can speak out, it usually goes nowhere good for the dictator. So this will probably be crushed pretty quick, but we are seeing surprisingly some protests happening inside of Russia, which is a bit of a shock. But moving into our next post here, this one's going to go to Tendar. And right here we can see why the Russian citizens are getting very, very worried, because the price of Russian oil continues to drop. In fact, it's plummeting, and it's reached around 36 USD a barrel, and this is almost half of the current market price for oil. And the latest steep fall resulted from the latest US sanctions package, and as predicted, Russians are using dumping prices in order to sell its most important commodity, partially at least, least, and in previous times, it was calculated that Russia needs around 70 USD per barrel in order to balance its expenditure, which right now it's only about half of that for the price, and that this does not even include the lower volumes that Russia is currently selling thanks to the Ukrainian strikes against oil terminals. So let me show you the actual numbers right here. You can see this is terrible. Right over here on the right, you can see this is the current price right now. It's currently hovering around $36 a barrel over here on the right. The only other time in the war that this has ever dropped quite like this, there was only 2 times. One of them was right after the invasion started back in February of 2022, and also another big drop was, I would say, a couple of months after that actually, but we've never really seen a sharp drop off quite like this, basically since the war started. So you can see how detrimental the sanctions have been on the Russian oil industry, and it is plummeting through the floor as you can see on this chart right here. So not doing good, and that's not accounting for the low volume that Russia is currently selling. That's even making it worse. So Russia having some very hard times about the oil, and that is not expected to get any better anytime soon. But jumping into our next one here, this one goes to War Translated. And we can see right here why the Russian oil price appears to be taking a very bad beating today, because the US president has threatened to impose extremely harsh sanctions on countries that continue to cooperate with Russia. So right now, this is the talk on the street. This is not necessarily action that's been taken for a certainty, and once again, it may or may not happen. You never can tell with US foreign policy right now, but it sounds like the US is threatening extremely harsh sanctions against any country that is buying the Russian oil or cooperating with Russia whatsoever. So if that threat turns out to be true against the foreign countries, this could even further hurt the Russian oil price as Ukraine is ramping up their attacks on Russian oil sites. So the Russian oil industry literally could not be taking a worse beating right now. It's literally got the maximum pressure on it that could be placed on it pretty much at any point in the war. So we'll wait and see how this is going to turn out. But I think this is going to push Russia to the extreme, and while they're already struggling and basically cornered at this point. But jumping into our next post, this one's going to go to Open Source Intel, and we've gotten some very good news today about the meeting between Zelensky and Macron in France about new weapons going to Ukraine. So let's take a look. Because we can see right here that Ukraine is set to receive 8 upgraded SAMP-T air defense systems, each equipped with 6 launchers and armed with the advanced Aster 30 Block 1NT missile, which offers significantly improved anti-ballistic missile performance, and they're going to be receiving this in Ukraine ahead of the French armed forces themselves of this modernized variant. So that is wild right there. You heard that right. The French are giving their upgraded SAMP-T air defense system to Ukraine before they give it to their own people and their own military. That is crazy right there, and that is a very, very kind maneuver by France to give that to Ukraine ahead of time before they even receive it. That is wildly generous. So that meeting has turned out very, very well that Zelensky went to France about, but also we got some even wilder news than that. We've also heard that Zelensky has apparently signed a deal to acquire 100 Rafale jets from France, and that's also a wild action out of this meeting right here. So that's impressive. It looks like that meeting was extremely productive, and once again, Macron is standing behind Ukraine 100%. So very good news out of that meeting as a whole. But also moving into our next story here, we've got some news on the front lines, and it looks like the Rasputitsa is moving in fast. And in case you're not familiar with what the Rasputitsa is, that means the Ukrainian mud season. And as you might be able to tell right here from this photograph, the mud season is a very bad time for frontline fighting. I mean, this right here is actually a guy sitting on an ATV with apparently some electronic warfare stuff on the front of it, but this is an ATV carrying a trailer, and you can barely make out what it is. It looks like it's made of plaster or something. So that's actually a guy in there, believe it or not. He's just covered in mud from head to toe. I'm not even sure how he's seeing at this point. He's covered in mud so bad. But Ukrainian mud is a different type of mud, and it's horrific actually. It's very bad, and it's very hard to fight in it. And right now we're expecting no really major offensives to be happening involving tanks, etc., while this Rasputitsa is going on. So this right now is going to be pretty much status quo for the front lines, and we'll probably see pretty much drone attacks being the main form of attack that we're seeing on these frontline situations. So right now, that is the situation. Very muddy right now and very wet, and also very uncomfortable, I'm sure, as well. But moving into our next post here, this one's going to go to Tendar. And believe it or not, we actually have a picture of the very trendy Flamingo missile that Ukraine is producing themselves. It's the FP5 missile, and right here you can see this is the missile, and they've actually painted it pink, and they've put like skull and bones on it and stuff like that. So a very cartoony looking missile right here. And also there's even a flamingo, actually an actual animal flamingo painting right there in the middle of it. And what a weapon this is right here. This is the weapon that carries a 1-ton warhead, and this has been used on Russia a handful of times so far. And we've also seen other like anti-ship missiles being used against Russia as well on Novorossiysk. But this right here is the Flamingo up close, which is a rare sighting of it, And you can see right here the gents are pointing at it and they're laughing because, of course, it's a pink missile and it's a very nice missile, of course. And this one right here will be the bane of Putin's existence and the bane of Russia's existence as a whole, because this right here could change the entire frontline situation on behalf of the Ukrainians. So that's an up-close view of it right there. But with that, we're now moving on from the picture there and on to our next post, and this one's going to go to AZ Intel. And we've also gotten some wild news today out of Japan, because right now the situation between Japan and China is actually escalating. It's not de-escalating, and we've heard today that Japan on Monday, which was this morning, has moved to tamp down an escalating row with China over Taiwan that has prompted Beijing to urge its citizens to stay away from its East Asian neighbor, which is Japan. So this appears to be a move by Japan to sort of tamp things down a bit, but we will find out in just a minute. That is not working so well. It looks like Japan is definitely in the crossfire of China right now, and this situation has the potential to escalate even worse, because this morning we have heard that apparently Japan has scrambled fighter jets after detecting a Chinese drone operating near its Yonaguni Island near Taiwan. So right here you can see this is allegedly where the drone was spotted, the Chinese drone that was operating near Japanese islands, and the Japanese even scrambled their fighter jets to intercept it. So dangerous times right now. It looks like China is for some reason picking a very, very strong fight against Japan, and right now it seems like it's being overblown. We're not really sure why China's overblowing this situation like they are, but it has the potential to escalate, so we're watching that very, very closely. But not only do we have news out of Japan and China, but also we have news out of Venezuela right now, because of course that is a pending conflict that's going to be breaking out very soon, and right now we're seeing a big deployment. We're seeing that Drew 11, which is a KC-135R Stratotanker, is refueling possible E-3G Sentry AWACS aircraft off the coast of Venezuela, and there it is. That is the KC-135 right off the coast of Caracas right there, which is the Venezuelan capital, and that is not a usual deployment. This aircraft is down there either refueling some type of AWACS aircraft or maybe something else beyond that. So we're seeing it right off the coast. That is certainly a bit unusual in my personal opinion. Some people out there claim that this is normal. I would say this is probably not normal, and this is preparations for strikes on Venezuela, which could be coming any day now. But also, we have not just seen Drew 11, we've also seen more in our next post here from Fintech's network, because we also saw another KC-135 pop up. This one was apparently taking off from Tampa, Florida, it appears. You can see right here on the flight radar image that it appears to be taking off from Tampa, and it looks like it's heading in the southerly direction, most likely down to Venezuela as well. So we did see that. A lot of refueling activity happening this morning on Monday of these U.S. Air Force refueling aircraft. And we've also seen as well that the C-2A Greyhounds, which are aircraft designed to serve as aircraft carriers, are once again active in Puerto Rico and servicing the Gerald R. Ford, which is in the area. So we saw that, and also we're seeing that apparently the KC-135s are turning off their transponders so that way they cannot be tracked. So that makes it a little bit difficult to figure out exactly what's going on right now, but we are seeing a lot of movements, which indicates that either maybe intelligence or reconnaissance is happening, or maybe the preparations for strikes are in their final stages. There's just no telling right now, but of course that's a very big action as of this morning. But with that, folks, that is actually our last piece of news of the video. So as you can tell, there's a lot of very big events happening today, a lot of stuff happening around the world. So if you enjoyed the video and found it informative today, smack that like button, and also if you haven't already, subscribe to the Enforcer channel. Go hit that subscribe button down at the bottom to stay up to date in real time from these videos right here that we put out as much as possible on the daily to keep you up to date about the events around the world. And also, by the way, if you want to support our channel financially, you can do so on our Patreon page, and the link is in the description below for Patreon, where you can go over there and sign up for a monthly membership, and it could be as little as $5 or $10 a month. Any amount helps the channel tremendously, and we do appreciate our Patreon supporters very, very much. But in the meantime, folks, we will be watching this event right here around Venezuela and around all the other regions, and if something major does happen, we will run an emergency live stream to cover that. But in the meantime, though, we will definitely have a live stream tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern, so be sure to join us for that. And in the meantime, folks, we will see you all then. And with that, bye-bye for now.